Christ told his followers that he would be back within the lifetime of those listening to him speak. And then everything would happen. These heavens would open, the world would end, and all the good would be taken up to heaven. Early Christianity was entirely designed around that belief, that they were living in the end of days, and all they had to do was survive and be Christ-like, and he would come back, and it would all be over, and they would go to heaven. When he didn't come back, Christianity went crazy, and people began to blame each other for not living Christ-like enough, and Christians killed many, many, many more of each other than the Romans ever killed of them. Down through history since then, the history of Christianity has been a series of increasingly complex ramifications trying to decide how one can live as Christians. There was never supposed to be a Christian culture. They were just supposed to hang around for one generation and it would all be over. So you get things like, at one point they decided, well, he was speaking symbolically. He really meant he'd come back in 1,000 years. And that was what was called the millennium, which means 1,000 years. At 1,000 years after the officially designated birth or death of Christ, I forget which it was, people actually gave away all they owned and went onto mountaintops waiting for Christ to come down, the way that UFO fanatics do nowadays. When he didn't come back then, it all escalated in craziness. There was even a theory during the Middle Ages of something called the Wandering Jew. And that was that there was one immortal Jew who didn't die, who represented the generation that heard Christ speak, and that he would live until Christ came. And one reason that Jews were allowed to survive in Europe at all was that one of them might be the Wandering Jew and must not be killed. I don't know what they thought would happen if he was. At any rate, you begin to see the directions that all this craziness goes. Some people said the doctrine of original sin was expanded and mutated to say that everybody were sinners, which was certainly not a tenet of Christ's at all. And so people must live in grinding poverty and misery. And you get in, again, in the Middle Ages, a lot of people who showed off how they suffered. Beggars who went naked and whipped themselves and went filthy and dirty and deliberately inflicted all sorts of horrible tortures on themselves. You get people standing on pillars with scabs all over them to show how holy they are. And that's another strain of this madness. If everybody just suffered enough, maybe Christ would come back. Or people said, well, he's not coming back because your section of Christianity is not worshiping correctly. And there would be wars between Christian sects. Or people thought it was their duty to die. Christians thought it was their duty to die. So they'd all get together in the church and set fire to it and die. One emperor, I forget which, actually issued a proclamation forbidding Christians to burn themselves in churches. This all, again, ramified and elaborated itself until you got, personally, I believe that the incredible subtlety and inventiveness of the Western mind may actually spring from the growth of the intellect trying to explain the contradictions and apparent falsities of Christianity, until you get people today able to contemplate things like string theory. When the New World opened and the Puritans, who were one of these self-denying sects of Christianity, when the Puritans happened to be the first Christians to come over and really take over big, you got this great, huge new continent everybody was so greedy to get, and that greed was in conflict with the self-denial and asceticism of Christianity, and you began to get this strange American Christianity where people say things like, well, God never told anybody to be a goddamn fool, and they wanted this land, so they said, well, the people who occupy this land aren't Christians, so it's all right if we kill and enslave and rob from them, because they weren't Christians, which is a very un-Christian tenet. All of this, you understand, is quite separate from the mystic side of Christianity. Apparently, Christ's followers are so shocked at his death that they went back to the Old Testament and found a lot of things there which they then decided just to comfort themselves. They found things which they decided were prophecies, that Christ would die, and he had known it, and all of that. And if you ever saw Bill Maher's movie Religulous, he has a whole section on the ancient Mediterranean myths that they grabbed and applied to Christ's life. In my opinion, the only real Christians died in the arena. Everything since then has been absolute madness, and you see all of these various ramifications of it that I fleetingly mentioned coming together in the fact that approximately half of the people in America are like Sarah Palin, who is the pathetic end product of centuries of contradiction and contraindications and justifications and ramifications and simplifications and elaborations, all based on the simple fact that Christ did not come back during the lifetime of his followers. I was talking about all this with a friend, and he said I was the only person he knew who knew this about Christianity, that's how it was founded, that's how it foundered and floundered, and it's in respect to that all the elaborations of it have been made right up to the present time. I hope this clears that up. This is something that should be in the minds of people when they think about Christianity. You know, you have to realize this was the big bang of Christianity, as it were, when Christ did not return, and they had to rationalize that to keep believing, and they had to figure out a civilization. As I said, there had never been meant to be a Christian civilization. And they had to figure out exactly how they're going to live. Were they going to be communists? Were they going to be capitalists? The first Christians lived in sort of little communes, just helping each other out till Christ came back. But then a lot of rich Romans began to get converted, and they weren't about to go live in the desert and put themselves. Well, as you can see, this could all be an entire course, and someone much more learned than I should teach it. I just wanted to put it into the American intellectual bloodstream, as it were. And you can blame all of this on my friend Andrew Adam Caldwell, who encouraged me to make this video.